I mentioned the Stan Romanek case. What's fascinating about that is that he literally makes a point that at certain points there are, for non-local communication across the galaxy, in his case, with this federation of ETs that he seems to be in touch with, then there's an element of universal timing to it. So it seems that the planets, certain things have to be in alignment. Some sort of alignment has to take place on this quantum super level for communication to take place. And if you look into his case, they even go so far as to phone him up on the phone and make this point. It's quite a fascinating case if you look into that, and all the issues about how they go to arrange contact, which will sort of fit into a lot of the stuff we're trying to do here. The whole non-local thing also fits into the fact that the military are meant to have invented a non-local space phone, which can basically communicate over any distance, and it's instantaneous.
And that's Skype.
Skype's getting
Cosmic
there.
Skype.
Yeah, cosmic. It's called Skype. Skype's getting close to being like that.
Based on gravity waves.
Is that what it does? Uses right. Okay, so that's it. So that's the point. So it's how to switch again from this idea of the individual to the group consciousness, and to maintain or amplify that whole idea of intent, which involves this switch to this quantum sort of level. Quantum's an overused term. It's on the internet all the time. People use it, but that basically means that non-local level where we're all connected. If you look back to the 1920s, when they first started doing all the experiments with the atoms and stuff, you find that actually when they tested two atoms or photons, was it at a distance, that both of them retained an element of communication between themselves, and that's basically the sort of area that we're trying to head with this communication. Steve is going to say a bit more about this, because like I said, he went over and spoke with Joe McMoneagle, who has done a lot of stuff on UFOs and remote viewing. But interestingly, remote viewing, it's how we try, this is what we've sort of struggled with for a bit here, because how do you fit remote viewing, which is usually about a definite target. So with remote viewing, they usually give you like coordinates, or they describe something. They have these blind tests where the remote viewer doesn't quite know what it is. The Eiffel Tower, it's a Russian base somewhere. The difference is, of course, we haven't got a definitive object to view. If you're trying to remote view, anomalous objects that are out there, as in saucers, people have done this, saucers or craft that are out there. Courtney Brown, has done that sort of thing. Then how do you validate anomalous data? That's the interesting thing with that. And how do you fit the remote viewing protocols into analysing or getting benefit from the whole remote viewing process when you're doing things that's meant to be anomalous? So you haven't got any real backup to it. You can't go and validate it like you can at a Russian missile base or the Eiffel Tower. So yeah, that's what you've got, intended and verifiable targets. They use a process of blind and double-blind experiments, which you'll see how those sort of fit in. Though the whole idea of that is more to do with the strict remote viewing than perhaps what we'll try and do a little bit later. And there we go, off-planet anomalous targets. A classic case is, of course, that I suppose you've got cameras that can go up and validate that, but when the face on Mars first came round and NASA wouldn't send round, there was a whole argument because NASA wouldn't send another camera round to retake it, or when they did, they came back with some smudgy image and said, oh, that's it, it's a pile of rocks. So they sent remote viewers out to basically say, well, what was the face on Mars? And of course, again, if NASA won't send another surveyor up, how do you then validate what the remote viewers found? If the remote viewer come back and said, yeah, that is definitely a face, then how do you validate that? But that's some of the uses.
So the whole point of like remote viewing, you've got various different people doing it in different locations, and they're coming up with the same thing. So, it's like to say we were all remote viewers in various parts of whatever. We knew nothing about that, and yet we're all describing or picking up certain things, exactly the same thing. So
very much so, and the whole idea that you perhaps you can add additional data to something, and that's how remote viewing does it. So that's another way.
It's
like
not always photographic evidence.
No. There's many ways of doing remote viewing, but it's again when it comes to stuff that you can't always verify, because you
to validate that it's like a picture, isn't it? But it's not about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it, doesn't it? That was just a point to say, well, that's a slightly anomalous object because you can't verify it, but you still want to know that the practice that you're doing, like you say, if you have many people that are unconnected that come up with the same thing, that's one way of validating.
How we vector in the first place to that object, isn't it? That's the issue. How remote viewing can be applied.
Yeah, and in the whole idea with C.E.5, the idea of remote viewing comes in. I suppose it's a cross between meditation and remote viewing. So, in the experience of vectoring, using remote viewing to vector in these crafts. So if you lock onto a craft, if you can remote view a craft and you sense some connection with it, then you use this remote viewing technique or this meditation technique to cross over to vector down these craft and bring them down to your area to get this display for the group. So if you as individuals feel some sort of contact, perhaps later tonight, then the whole idea, if you feel some sort of contact, it feels different, then can you lock that process on? Can you then vector in this craft or this object and bring it down for the group? Or ask for group support in doing that? I don't know. This is all stuff we're out there to try and find out. And again, Resh has written a bit of stuff on this, but it's trying to find a way that we can get protocols together, because no one's really done this. Again, it's trying to find these protocols between meditation, between remote viewing, to try and find out how we can repeat this process and make a successful progress. And of course, the validation will be if someone says, I feel some sort of connection or lock on, or there's something up there, there's a craft up there that we've seen and we're going to guide it over here. That's all been done, that sort of stuff is possible, but how do we go about that, and how can we make it a sort of repeatable process to take to other groups and perhaps do ourselves again in the future. Quick another note on remote viewing. We mentioned that, does anomalous data work? Interestingly, on that point with anomalous data, you've got Ingo Swann there, who wrote the book Penetration, who did a lot of stuff on the moon and moon bases, all of which since, I suppose, we've had people on the Disclosure Project that have come out and swear they've seen photos at NASA bases and stuff, and people know that on the backside of the moon, the dark side of the moon, there's a lot of stuff going on up there. And he wrote a fascinating book. If you can get a copy of that, I think you can download that on the internet. Yeah. But it's fascinating, and he mentions he mentions ET actions going on the moon. And again, one of the first successful remote viewers who did some amazing work. The three types of remote viewing. So that's it. The unofficial military projects, Project Stargate that went on, and the Stanford Research Institute. There's Alfred Weber, who wrote the first book on exopolitics, and he was part of the Stanford Research Institute Carter White House study. They were basically going to use remote viewing to contact ETs. That was the idea, and they got this all the way to sort of Carter White House level. Then George Bush Sr. came and shut down the process, and apparently hounded poor Alfred out of the USA. So Alfred now lives in Canada. So he claims that he was harassed by weird energy weapons and all sorts of stuff. Quite an interesting story. So remote viewing ETs has gone all the way to sort of White House level and then was shut down. That's the point. B just mentions the Farsight Institute. That's sort of a civilian institute that also works with some military people that have worked in remote viewing, and they've done some amazing stuff on remote viewing Mars and also the future 2012, that sort of thing. So they've done a lot of stuff on that area. Also, more recently, people have started remote viewing crash retrieval sites, so well-known sites where the crashed or downed UFOs have actually gone. Then people have started actually remote viewing those and saying what they've seen has actually gone on. People have done it, of course, with Roswell or whatever else. So that's another one. And to a degree, I suppose some of that can also be validated if you then have other witnesses to say, well, Roswell has said, yeah, well, this did happen. So you can validate a little bit of that as well. Okay, hopefully turning up today. This is JLW. Hopefully turning up, because he said he would. I've got a message. On the internet since 2007 has been a guy who's he's a genius with night vision camera technology and also telescopic technology for taking astrovideography. And since 2007 he's been really annoying the Ministry of Defence and the Americans that are over here by basically taking pictures of these objects in space. These are space platforms which most people, whether astronomers in the UK or America, wherever, hadn't actually found. They knew these things were there. These are some really complex. There's numerous ones of these, and some of these morph and move. These are sort of space platforms that we think are probably launching satellites. We don't think they're vehicles as such, but there's a whole variety. These are really crap images. If you go online and type them into YouTube or just type a picture image and find some high resolution ones, you'll see video of these sort of craft up there.
Do you know how big they are?
Sorry?
Do you know how big they are?
He told me
Well, that's got to be absolutely huge.
Miles and miles and
Well,
miles.
if they're repairing probably spaceships and huge satellites, they're going to be pretty big. But you can actually, there's footage of some of these things closing up and moving. And the problem is, when in 2007 he put these online, a week later they went on Jeff Rent's, which is one of the biggest websites in America for news.
Yeah.
Within a week, I've got footage he sent me of huge Chinook helicopters, Apache gunships coming and hovering over his house, and they were basically telling him not to put this stuff online. He got quite scared, he got followed around. So he's done that. So he then moved, you can see then, he then moved a few years later, I don't know what date that is, 2008, he moved then to doing the moon. And ironically, again, genius with how he set this up, he had ex-MOD technology on some of his scopes. It was a special way of painting the mirrors on the telescope to get this sort of footage. So he sort of moved to the moon again, but then he sort of annoyed people again because he got better footage. Ironically, at the time when he first put his moon footage up in 2008, they sent an educational satellite up for the kiddies around the world to sort of have a look at the moon and say, oh, what's the moon about? Let's have a look at the moon. But we had a look, and his resolution was way better from the planet than this satellite. They were letting, obviously, I don't believe the military or educational institute sent up a satellite that came back with poor resolution. They basically fiddled it, didn't they? So the resolution was sort of limited for what could be used by school kids and stuff. But again, he came up. He can literally zoom through craters with his stuff.
Can I ask David, how long has he been doing this?
Yeah.
What did you say?
2007, his first
that's
stuff went up.
And where did he get this technology?
I should say this. He
I'll let him tell us.
well, he won't tell you. If he turns up, he's very close. He's very
Okay.
quiet. Basically, his scope, his first scope where he got the night vision stuff to get these from, was from the MOD. Commissioned a separate company to create a system where from I think from from an aeroplane they could detect toxic gas over the UK. There was a certain type of nerve gas that they were trying to find over the UK, that if the UK got covered in this nerve gas, they could pick out where it was, because it had a certain light fragmentation thing. Then this sort of telescope they set up could pick out this toxic gas. That's the story that they gave him.
In itself, isn't
It is in a way, but this weirdly then this technology. He then begs them. How he met them, I don't know. He's very careful in what he says. He then asked them and gave them money to build him a duplicate scope with this quote MOD technology of these UV painted mirrors. And it took him 2 years. They didn't even want to give it him. He told me a whole story about how he backwards and forwards after he paid them, trying to get them. They were like, no, we can't. We want to give you your money back. And he's like, oh no, I want the scope. And eventually he gets it, and that's what took these pictures here, which astonished even
Quite an
Cambridge.
interesting story.
What was the location of these? Like in the sky? Where was?
It's classed as, it's still classed as low Earth orbit, which is God, you're talking. I
It's
don't
about
know.
80 miles, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got 70
Just
years.
gravity well.
I suppose, yeah. So you have low Earth orbit, which is just you still have, you can have satellites going even higher out than that, but
Can I ask, are these different from the EMVs that have been reported? They're the ones that seem to be, gravitating around
the sun,
Saturn, the sun,
The sun,
and
yeah.
harvesting the energy. Is this a
What's an
separate
EMV?
electromagnetic.
electromagnetic
Oh, okay.
vehicle? Look at James Horrock. He's kind of. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, those are all the objects that you can see, but you don't get as clearly. I mean, that's not a good example. You'll go and you'll literally see the workings of these things, and sometimes you can see the rigging of how they've been constructed.
That's
So
another picture below it, the blue one. That's a totally
Yeah.
different craft.
Yeah.
it is that's a different
I
one.
never-
And actually, that one is taken from a still from one of his videos, and that's the one I think that you'll see closing up and shrinking.
Well,
It's even more because they're enormous, but then they just compress,
Yeah.
change it. It's
Yeah.
mind blowing.
We did work out the size of them, and I totally forgot. I know.
It was like 20, 30 miles, wasn't
I don't know. I don't know if they're that big.
Yeah, no, I remember them being absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Just thinking, whoa.
Yeah.
That's
And
it? No, you're not saying